Welcome to Keep the Game Beautiful podcast. Each week, I highlight incredible people who are doing amazing things in soccer, the beautiful game. I'm Anna Turi, your host. Thank you for listening. Welcome back to Keep the Game Beautiful. Today I talked to JP Dellacamera, who is a Fox Sports broadcaster. We recorded this live in Philadelphia at United Soccer Coaches Convention. I think this was specifically really interesting for me because this past year at convention, I had a lot of questions being asked about my future career and if I wanted to go into broadcasting. And to be honest, it's not something that I had thought about before, and it didn't even seem like an option. But now that I've become so comfortable talking to people, it's kind of in my mind. I still don't know what the future holds, of course, but looking at where I was when I first started the podcast, it was really hard for me to just talk to people and to just create a genuine conversation. But now I've really found my voice and I've become so much more comfortable. So, like I said, I don't know what the future holds, but it's definitely going to be something that will interest me for a while. So I love talking to JP Dellacamera, and I really hope you enjoyed the episode too. So in this podcast, I ask the same 3 questions each time, and we're going to start with, what does the beautiful game mean to you?
The beautiful game to me is just our sport, whether it's outdoor soccer or indoor soccer, whether it's men's soccer, women's soccer, youth soccer, international soccer, it doesn't matter. It's all part of the beautiful game, and the more we talk about soccer, in whatever phase it is we're talking about, the greater it is to spread the word.
What are actions or things you do to keep the game beautiful?
Try to be the best broadcaster I can, I would say. Embrace every event that I have. I'd like to think anyway that I treat an NWSL game or an MLS game like I would treat a World Cup game. I'd like to think I would treat a men's game the same way I would treat a women's game. And so if I stay true to that, I guess that's my contribution. Fantastic question, by the way. Never been asked that one.
Thank you. And how do you encourage others to keep the game beautiful?
I think keeping it positive, and I think by supporting it, right? So if you have a team in your city, whether it's a men's team, a women's team, a young team, an older team, it doesn't matter. Support the game, I would say, right? So especially for women, we're trying to get more equality into it, right? So what we do for the men, we should try to do for the women. If you have a new women's team in your area, regardless of the league, whether it's amateur, whether it's pro, support it, help them out. You're just spreading the game.
Yeah. What led you to become a broadcaster?
When I was in high school, I remember in my high school yearbook, I didn't have a specific, certainly not to soccer, but I did say I wanted to be involved in sports broadcasting. I think growing up in Boston, we had all of the major sports there, and so you grew up as a sports fan, and that made me want to do that. And probably because there was nothing else I was interested in except for one thing. I always thought about being a disc jockey. That was it. So I had love of music and sports, and in the end, sports ruled, because I thought you could have a much longer career if you're a sportscaster than if you are a rock and roll DJ.
With this podcast, a lot of people have asked me if I wanted to go into a broadcasting career, and if I ever decided I wanted to, what do you think my biggest learning curve would be?
Biggest learning curve would probably depend on what you wanted to do in broadcasting. It's different if you want to be a newscaster, somebody that does the weather, play-by-play person, whatever it is, right? But I would say the learning curve would be the preparation, because in order to be really good at whatever it is that you choose, you have to do the homework.
Yeah.
And homework is like, if you think you have homework in school, it's nothing like in the professional world. Right?
Yeah.
So I think that if you think that when you get out of high school or you get out of college that your homework days are over, then don't go into broadcasting.
When you first started out, did you realize you would have to do so much homework?
I don't think you ever think about that stuff.
Yeah.
You love what you're doing so much that you want to get better at it. But you have to remember, like, I'm looking at how young you are compared to me. And when I first did this, there was no internet.
Yeah.
There was no cell phone. there were no research websites. There was nothing. So you really had to do your homework, right?
Yeah.
Game notes would be 10 pages. Do you know what a fax machine is, by the way?
Not
See?
really.
But we would have notes faxed to us.
Yeah.
I didn't have a fax machine in my house, so I had to go to a printing place to get game notes faxed to me. Now, game notes could be 60, 70 pages. There's thousands of websites that you can go to regardless of what sport you're involved in. So there's an endless supply of research now and homework that you have to do. I think the hardest thing now is to know when to stop doing it because you can cram your brain with so much stuff that it's impossible to remember. And so you need to quit before that happens. Otherwise, there's too many things in your head.
How do you find that balance of what's enough but what's too much?
Experience. That's a great question, but experience. Because I think that's the only way you can do it. When I've done Olympics or World Cups, somebody will say, what's the hardest thing to do? And when it's their first one, and I'll say it's the preparation. Because there's so much out there, and you could literally do hours and hours and miss the game.
Yeah.
I mean, you could be doing homework right up until the game. You have to know when to put it down, when enough is enough. Because when you do television, the theory we use is that if you use 30% of what you've studied for in a game, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So if you do more than that, you're probably talking too much. If you do less than that, that's probably okay, but 30%. And when you think about that, if you think about all the hours that you put in, and you're only going to use 30%, doesn't sound like much, but it really is a lot.
Yeah. You talked about the equality of women in sports. How have you seen that grow over the years?
Amazingly, if you just look at the U.S. women's national team and their fight for equal rights, I still think we've got a ways to go.
Yeah.
Like, we're finally getting to a point now where this next World Cup you'll have 32 women's teams, but now next time the men will be at 48. So do we do that, for the women? I don't know. But I mean, more things have to happen like that. If it's good for the women, if you have VAR in the men's game, you have to have it in the women's game. And now we're seeing next year, NWSL will have video review in their game. It'll be for the first time.
Yeah.
And I think that's fantastic. And I think if we look at it like everything is a gain, everything is a small gain, we're not where we need to be, we're not where we should be, but if we keep doing it this way, like 10% here, 20% here, 30%, at some point in your lifetime, it'll be equal.
You talked about broadcasting an NWSL and MLS game the same. How do we take the bias out of sport?
How do we take the bias? Tell me what kind of bias you mean.
I'm just thinking generally the bias of women's sports aren't quote unquote as fun to watch.
I think that's like an individual thing. I think give it a try, right? If I watch an NBA game, I'm entertained, right? I love watching a WNBA game. It's basketball. It's basketball at the highest level, right? If you watch a good men's college basketball game, and then you turn on a women's college basketball game like UConn versus South Carolina, every bit as entertaining as whatever two men's teams you want to give me. So I think with a lot of people, it's just giving it a chance. If somebody says, I really don't like women's soccer, my first question would be, have you seen a game? Right? Have you watched any of it?
Yeah.
Same with basketball. You know what I mean? So I think part of our bias, everybody, you might tell me you hate broccoli. And I'll say, when did you have broccoli? And you say, well, I've never had broccoli, but I don't like the smell of it. I don't like the look of it. Try it. You might like it. If you don't, it's okay, but try it.
And how can we continue to encourage the growth of women's sports?
Keep funding it, first of all, right? Keep the participation going, and I think in too many cases we burn kids out. I'm not thinking so much on the women's side as the boys' side. Somebody said this yesterday at a seminar I was at. They said that a parent told them that they had a 6-year-old boy who's a left back, and the coach said, how do you know he's a left back? He's 6 years old, Let him enjoy life as a kid. Let him enjoy the experience before you mentally take him away from it, right? I think that we lose too many good people, young people, because parents, coaches, friends put so much pressure on them, right? Let them be a kid first, right? You're never going to be a professional athlete at the age of 6, right? And how would I even know? How would anybody know if you even had that potential? So don't treat a 6-year-old kid or 7 or an 8 or whatever age you want to say as a professional, because you'll drive them away from the game. So I would say be more positive. Let kids do whatever, help them in whatever they can, but make it fun. Because if it's not fun for you as a young kid to play sports, it's not going to be your chosen path to professionalism, because you'll be burned out by then.
Yeah. I think I personally even felt some burnout, and I've never had parents who put immense amounts of pressure on me.
Yep.
But what can a coach do if they see a parent putting pressure on their kids?
These are unbelievable questions. It's hard, right? Because I look at it and I'm wondering, how do some parents do this? Like, I don't have, you know what I mean? I don't have that answer. Like, I was never that way with my kids. If they wanted to play sports, they did. And if they didn't, they didn't, right? It's their life. It's their dream. It's their goal. So I think if I'm a coach, you got to kind of tread that line, right? If you know the parent, I think you could say, my daughter Anna's, getting a little bit burnt out. I would appreciate it if you could take a little bit of the pressure off. You know what I mean? If you know them. But if you don't, you got to know who you're talking to. You don't want to upset anybody. You know what I mean? Because it's not your kid, right? It's a great question, though, but it's probably for somebody that would give a better answer than me.
Were there ever times you felt burnt out as a broadcaster, or maybe just exhausted in general?
No. There are some games that I've done where when the game is over, you're like saying, wow, that was amazing. I got nothing left. But those are like few and far between, because most of the time it's an adrenaline rush, and when the best game you've called is over, you're still on a high. But I just did a game, MLS Cup final, streaming. It was a radio call, and it was Philadelphia and LAFC, and it might have been, some people are saying it was the greatest game in MLS history.
Yeah.
When that game was over, I was mentally out of it. I was mentally drained. That game took more out of me than any game I can remember, because first of all, I was a Philadelphia Union announcer, and I know the players, I know the coach, I know the fans, I know how much it meant, and they were ahead in the game, and with minutes to go, they lost on penalty kicks. So I felt so bad for the players, because of what they did, and that I was drained.
Yeah.
I think had they won, I was still going to be drained, but it would have been a different adrenaline feeling in the end.
I had never really thought of it as an adrenaline feeling. Do you remember the first time you got that adrenaline high?
Probably the first game, whatever that was that I did, which I don't remember, but I just always liked doing it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there was always an adrenaline high. I think some people, because I've heard them say it, get nervous, like before a game or during a game or whatever. I've never had that. That doesn't mean anything, right? Some people get nervous. Some professional athletes will tell you they get nervous.
Yeah.
I've never felt that. I'm not nervous now, but I'm more nervous or less comfortable doing this interview than if I was doing a game, because I'm not used to doing this. I'm used to doing games. So that's like my comfort level. You don't seem nervous at all doing this. Seriously.
That's good. It's taken a lot of time for me.
How long have you done this?
I've done it for 4 years, so.
Maybe you're older than I think.
Yeah, I started the podcast on my 14th birthday.
Wow.
So,
good for you.
thank you.
Good for you.
So I have actually one final question that I ask all of my guests. What do you hope people remember about your impact to soccer and the world?
Wow. Somebody just asked me that, and I struggled with it a little bit. It'll be easier for me to do this now because I just answered him. He had asked me what my legacy would be, and I think that doing whatever the number is when I'm done, World Cups at 16 now, I think that's always going to be part of my legacy. But the fact that I think, without this being taken the wrong way or insulting to anybody, I've done it as an American voice. I've not used foreign terms. I don't say pitch, I don't say boots, I don't say fixtures, I don't say table, 0-0 as a score. I stick with American terminology and American soccer sports terminology, and I think that would be part of something that I would like to be remembered for.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure, Anna.
Thank you.
It's kind of funny that JP Dellacamera talked about doing research, because if you've listened to the podcast before, you know I do a lot of research. I do a nice introduction, and I have questions that this person I may be interviewing hasn't even brought up yet, or things about their past that are just so interesting to me. Now, this convention, I really didn't do any research at all because I didn't have a plan. And I think that created some really genuine conversations, which it was interesting. I really had to think on my feet. But going forward, I will definitely be returning to do a little bit more research and thinking about my guests, because that is truly fits in with my personality and something I enjoy to do. I hope you enjoyed the episode. And until next time, remember to keep the game beautiful.